Hey!
Check this out.
Okay.
Tapioca.
Okay.
Let's give you the uglier one.
Thank you. I know the beauty is on the inside, and that's all that counts.
Anything missing, Eric, from this breakfast?
No, everything looks like it's just perfect.
Oh my god. I'm such a coffee.
Quiero café!
So here's a question that I've been thinking about. Would you ever move to Brazil? And if so, under what circumstances?
For how long?
For your life. Or for, let's say, at least 5 years. Like, I moved to Brazil, but I was only there for a year and a half. And I didn't really think I was going to stay there, although it was open to the possibility.
Right.
And I was also much younger. Younger even
Right.
than you are today. That's not true.
You were never younger than I am today. I did Lebanon for 3 years, and at the end of the 3 years, I was ready to go. I still loved Lebanon, but I felt like I reached the maximum of what could I do there. My opportunity for me felt like it had reached a limit.
I guess the question is not just would you move to Brazil, would
Right.
you move to another country for
Right.
the rest of your lives? And you think about Brazilians and a lot of people who write in and say they would love to move to the United States for the rest of their life.
Right.
But that I understand. I'm not so sure they'd be as happy as they think they would be.
Right.
Because moving to another country is very hard no matter what the other country is.
It's true.
But I understand that there's an economic incentive there, and there's a safety issue there, and the life in the United States is just in general safer and better economically than it is in Brazil on average. But we live in the United States. We're American citizens.
Yeah.
I believe you're also a British citizen.
Yep.
I'm a German citizen. Goodbye to you from the EU.
See you later.
So we could live in Europe or in the United States. There's not necessarily an obvious reason that we would want to move to Brazil.
I would say of all the countries that I would move to, Brazil is near the top of the list.
Yeah, well, for me, it's definitely the top of the list because I have a fan base in Brazil. I have lots of friends in Brazil. I have at least some way vaguely to think. I kind of wanted to teach at a Brazilian university. I think that would be fun to teach journalism at a Brazilian university. I'm sure it's not easy in Brazil, but I'm like this wacky guy that comes in. I'm like, what's this guy doing applying for a job here?
And why is he teaching in a sunga? Would I ever move to Brazil? I would, but I would need certain conditions to be.
So what are those conditions? What could make you move to Brazil?
Number one is I would need to feel engaged professionally somehow.
Right.
That's just such an important thing for my life. Yeah, if I could make movies in Brazil, maybe some production company had a relationship with them and they wanted me to make feature films or direct a Brazilian Netflix series, that would be pretty cool.
If you do have a production company there, I'd like you to call it Seth Productions.
Why?
In honor of the person that introduced you to Brazil.
That's true.
I think another obvious one would be love.
Yeah.
Neither of us have ever been married.
Right.
And if the woman of our dreams were Brazilian, and we might move to Brazil to be with her.
Oh, for sure. And I've always thought the woman is from Georgia, the country of Georgia. I would go there. I'm open to going wherever the woman is from. But I would say, though, something I think about is if I did fall in love with a Brazilian woman, which, let's face it, there's a higher chance of that happening than most other nationalities.
The problem is just the Brazilian woman falling in love with you, which is dubious.
Right. It's a challenge. But let's say it happened, and I were to marry a Brazilian woman. That means I have to fly 12 hours every year for the rest of my life. And right now I'm young, and I'm like, I'm traveling. I'm a traveler. I love to go all over the world, and I don't care. Put me in the back of the plane. I don't care with the fat guy and the crying baby. But I don't know, when I'm 60, will I want to be flying 12 hours every summer to go to Salgueiro? Do I want to be going to Salgueiro every twice a year?
You could go to a Carcará game. You have the shirt already.
That's true. I already have the shirt. I'm already halfway there.
But here, let me take it a step further. That also will reduce the amount you can travel elsewhere. We both love to travel. Mm-hmm. What if you end up having, 3 or 4 weeks off a year?
Right.
You're going to use at least probably 2 of those weeks to visit people in the United States.
Right.
So when are you going to go to France? When are you going to go to Lebanon? When are you going to go to Turkey?
China.
When are you going to go to China? People think about the short term.
Right.
It's going to be fun. Think about the medium term. Oh, I could maybe raise my kids in Brazil. It's a good culture. Or maybe if we had enough money to send them to a good school. But the long term, you'll be disillusioned with Brazil by then. in many ways, just like you would be with any country.
Right.
Like expats who spend 20 years in the country just always have some grudge against the country. You're dying in Brazil.
Right.
Are you ready for that?
Outside of work, the next thing is social, right?
Yeah.
And Brazil has the most socially satisfying atmosphere I've ever been in. The idea of a group that goes out, being able to hang out with someone that you don't know that well, and very quickly you have a upbeat, fun rapport. That just doesn't happen here.
Right, well, you know my saying, I'd rather go out with 5 Brazilian strangers than 5 American friends.
Yeah, and that's totally true. And there's the idea that the group matters. Like, here, we don't appreciate a group, we don't care about a group. So it's not even a value. And something about the value of a group, I mean, you look at the idea of Carnival, which is in the street, or even like in the Boteco, where everyone shares one bottle of beer, and it's like you get the little cups, and to me that is so beautiful. It's like a symbol of the idea of how do they see the group.
And you know what? This is another great thing about Brazil. Expats in Brazil have Brazilian friends.
Yeah.
That is not that common.
Turkey is a great example. Foreigners don't have Turkish friends.
Yeah.
They hang out with foreigners, and Turks occasionally, out of curiosity, will let an American hang out with them,
Yeah.
but there's such a cultural difference
Yeah.
and such a language barrier.
That's a huge advantage of Brazil. You're going to make friends. The Brazilians make friends. Safety, of course, though, is the other side of it.
That's the only real concern for me. I don't think anything else is serious enough to keep me away, and safety wouldn't keep me away either. It's a factor that's like, I don't think something will happen to me, but I think that I'll always have tension.
And also, you don't know what's going to happen to Brazil. That's the thing. I mean, of course, we've learned this here now with Donald Trump. No one ever knows what your country is going to turn into. But Brazil is, by default, a country that you have no idea what it's going to be like in 5 years, or even in a couple of months after the presidential election. And things can go haywire. I mean, they probably won't. Probably be more or less the same for a foreigner, but not necessarily. Crazy things happen.
Yeah.
I always say this, like, a foreigner who says they love Brazil just will come right out and say, I love Brazil, has not been to Brazil enough. It's the same thing I'd say with any country. When you really get to know any country, including the United States, it's very hard to say, I love the United States. It's, I love these things about the United States.
Right.
And there's some things I don't love so much about the United States.
It's like getting to know a person.
Well, being far away from your family, you have many siblings, you love going to visit them.
Yeah.
That will be hard both for you and for them.
Right.
For my parents, I know they say, go do what you want, go live in Brazil. But in reality, it would be hard.
Yeah. I would need to get rich to fly them to Brazil.
You know what I have to say? I think that money is a much bigger factor than we're letting on here. When you are really in need of money, if you had 3 kids and you were looking at, where are they going to be educated, creating some stability for them, it becomes a much higher bar to where you're going to live. So for me, definitely, it comes down to this. Economic opportunity. For me personally, there's some ways of thinking that I could do okay for myself in Brazil. And, quite frankly, love.
Yeah.
A partner, that would be a huge incentive to go to Brazil.
Oh, of course. And even if I married an American, she would have to be okay with all the craziness of being in Brazil, too.
Well, that's a whole other story for another time. It's like, what in the world? We're weird.
Yeah.
Brazilians think we're weird to like Brazil, but Americans think we're nuts. Like, what? Why? Are you Brazilian? Like, Kugel, is that a Brazilian work name? Because it's just crazy. Like, when I have dated non-Brazilians, they're like, what? You're talking on the phone in Portuguese? I would understand if, like, your parents were Brazilian, you have to talk to your parents. But, like, this is just too weird.
Yeah.
Like, what? I'm using I don't know why she'd be using my phone. But I'm using your phone and it's set to Portuguese? It's changing all the spellings to Portuguese? So there is that little aspect, too. Probably if you dated someone who is totally not Brazilian, you would hope that they were into another country, so they would get it anyway.
Whenever I was 21, I was thinking, should I marry this girl? The girl I was dating. Mm-hmm. She would have had no clue what she was signing up for.
Yeah.
She would have signed up for one thing, and now she'd be getting this Brazil situation, or probably, maybe I would have sacrificed Brazil for her sake. But you know what I mean? It's crazy.
Although, that's always true when you commit to somebody. You have no idea what's going to happen.
That's true.
Not that we would know.
Yeah, marriage advice from Seth and Eric.
I do have one final point to bring up here. Another thing that's very attractive about Brazil for me, as opposed to maybe almost every other country in the world, is how much there is to see and do and learn about Brazil.
Right.
This is a humongous country with a really interesting history.
Right.
Cities and regions that are so different from each other. I'm fascinated by the north of Brazil, the Amazon, but not particularly the rainforest itself, but the culture that has grown up around it.
Right.
Like, I want to do a book about the Amazon, and that's just one piece of Brazil. And you could spend a whole lifetime learning about it. I used to be interested in the Dominican Republic. I broke up with the Dominican Republic to start dating Brazil. And I love the Dominican Republic, but it's a pretty small country.
Yeah.
I've been almost literally to every municipality in the Dominican Republic. And that would never happen with Brazil.
No, I've been around a lot. I think there's only a few other places that could hold my interest in that way, like India, China, Turkey. End of list. Mexico, maybe.
There's certain countries that are really rich enough to hold their own and not need an outside culture.
Right.
And I think you just named some of them. Like, this has always been my theory of the world. The most interesting countries, the most interesting with the deepest sort of cultural richness are countries where they're the main country that speaks their language in the world, and there's a big space, there's a big geography, they're self-sufficient culturally.
Right.
So Turkey, people don't think about this much, but Turkey's a very big country.
Right.
And Turkish is their language, and I know a few other countries around speak at least similar languages to Turkish. But they have to be self-sufficient. They got their own literature. They obviously have an amazing history.
Yeah.
Brazil, Russia would be something like that. China. Mexico is just rich in and of itself. It doesn't have the language requirement because they're probably busy like watching Argentine films or something like that. So any final thoughts?
If one of us moves to Brazil, this will be a funny video to watch in 10 years.
On the hologram YouTube?
Yeah.